President Traoré was getting ready for a very important dinner. It wasn't just any dinner. It was a special event with important people from all over Burkina Faso. He put on his best clothes and made sure his hair was just right. He knew he had to look his best, because tonight was about showing everyone that Burkina Faso was strong and ready for the future. The dining hall was huge and shiny, with lots of tables covered in white cloths. Bright lights sparkled, and the air smelled like delicious food. President Traoré smiled and shook hands with everyone as he walked to his seat at the head of the table. He felt proud and excited. This dinner was a chance to talk about new ideas and make Burkina Faso even better. He knew it would be a long night, but he was ready. Little did he know, this fancy dinner would soon turn into a night of danger and secrets. The waiters began serving the first course. It looked beautiful, with colorful vegetables and a creamy sauce. President Traoré picked up his fork, eager to taste the delicious-looking food. He took a bite, and, at first, it tasted wonderful. But then, something strange happened. His mouth started to burn, and his stomach felt like it was twisting into knots. He coughed and gasped for air. His vision blurred, and he felt dizzy. What's happening? He thought, his mind racing. He clutched his throat, unable to speak. The people around him noticed something was wrong. Their happy faces turned to looks of worry and fear. Someone shouted, "The president is sick." Chaos erupted in the dining hall. People jumped up from their seats, shouting and pointing. The beautiful dinner had turned into a nightmare in just one bite. President Traoré knew something terrible was happening to him, and he was losing control. Doctors and nurses rushed to President Traoré's side, pushing through the panicking crowd. They quickly checked his pulse and looked into his eyes. Their faces grew grim. "He's been poisoned," one of them shouted. "It's a chemical poison." The room went silent for a moment, then erupted into even more frantic activity. Everyone knew how dangerous poison could be. The doctors worked quickly, giving President Traoré medicine to try and stop the poison from spreading. They carefully lifted him onto a stretcher. "We need to get him to the hospital now," the head doctor yelled. The stretcher was rushed out of the dining hall, followed by a group of worried officials and security guards. The once beautiful hall was now a scene of confusion and fear. The delicious smell of food was replaced by the sterile scent of medicine and the heavy atmosphere of dread. Everyone wondered who would do such a terrible thing. The ambulance raced through the streets of Ouagadougou, its sirens wailing. Inside, doctors and nurses worked tirelessly to keep President Traoré alive. His breathing was shallow, and his face was pale. Every bump in the road felt like a threat. Finally, they arrived at the hospital. A team of specialists was waiting, ready to take over. They wheeled President Traoré into the emergency room, a place filled with beeping machines and hushed voices. The doctors worked quickly, running tests and giving him more medicine. Outside, the nation held its breath. News of the president's poisoning spread like wildfire. People gathered in the streets, whispering prayers and holding candles. They were worried and scared, but they also had hope. They believed in their president and prayed he would pull through. The hospital became the center of attention, the place where everyone's hopes and fears were focused. While doctors fought to save President Traoré's life, his closest advisors met in a secret room. They knew this wasn't just an accident. Someone had tried to kill the president, and they needed to find out who and why. "This was no ordinary poisoning," said Amadou, the head of security. "It was planned carefully and deliberately." Fatima, the president's closest advisor, nodded. "Someone on the inside helped them. Someone we trust." The room fell silent as they realized the terrible truth. The person who poisoned President Traoré was someone close to him, someone who knew his schedule and his food. It was a betrayal of the worst kind. "We need to find them," Amadou said, his voice grim. Before they try again, they agreed to start a secret investigation, looking for clues and questioning everyone who had access to the president's food and schedule. They knew it would be a difficult and dangerous task, but they were determined to bring the traitor to justice. The safety of Burkina Faso depended on it. As the advisors dug deeper, they discovered a shocking truth. The person who helped poison President Traoré wasn't just working alone. They were connected to powerful people in other countries who wanted to control Burkina Faso. These foreign powers were worried that President Traoré was making Burkina Faso too independent. They didn't want him making his own rules. They want to weaken us, Fatima said, her voice filled with anger. They want to take our resources and tell us what to do. Amadou nodded grimly. That's why they tried to kill the president. They thought if he was gone, they could control us more easily. The advisors knew they had to be careful. These foreign powers were dangerous and had a lot of influence. They had to protect Burkina Faso's freedom, not just from the traitor within, but also from the enemies outside. The stakes were higher than ever before. They were not just fighting for the president's life, but for the future of their nation. To find the traitor and uncover the foreign powers' plan, the advisors needed someone special. They needed someone smart, brave, and trustworthy. They decided to call on Maurice Sankara. Maurice Sankara was a brilliant detective. He used to be the head of intelligence, but President Traoré had dismissed him a few months earlier after a disagreement. It was a difficult decision for the president, as Sankara was very good at his job. Some advisors were unsure if Sankara would help, given that he had been dismissed. However, Fatima argued, Sankara loves Burkina Faso. Even if he's angry with the president, he won't let our country fall into the wrong hands. They sent for Sankara, hoping he would agree to help. They knew he was their best chance to solve this dangerous mystery and protect Burkina Faso from those who wanted to control it. His skills and dedication were now more important than ever. Maurice Sankara sat alone in his small office, surrounded by files and old photographs. He was surprised when he received the message asking him to meet with the president's advisors. He wondered what they wanted after all this time. When he arrived, the advisors explained everything: the poisoning, the traitor, and the foreign powers involved. Sankara listened carefully, his expression growing more serious with each word. Burkina Faso is in danger, Fatima said, her voice pleading. We need your help, Sankara. You're the only one we trust to solve this. Sankara thought for a moment. He still felt hurt by his dismissal, but he loved his country more than anything. He couldn't stand by and watch it be destroyed by traitors and foreign powers. I'll do it, Sankara said firmly. I'll find the person who did this, and I'll protect Burkina Faso. A wave of relief washed over the advisors' faces. They knew they had made the right choice. The hunt for the traitor had begun. Sankara began his investigation by carefully reviewing the guest list and interviewing everyone who worked at the dinner. He looked for anything suspicious, any small detail that might give him a clue. The deeper he dug, the more he realized the traitor was someone with close access to the president. Someone who knew his routine, his likes and dislikes, and most importantly, someone who could get close to his food. Finally, Sankara's attention focused on Alain, a palace advisor who had worked closely with President Traoré for many years. Alain was always by the president's side, offering advice and support. Nobody would ever suspect him. But Sankara found some inconsistencies in Alain's story. He also discovered that Alain had been making secret phone calls to a number in France. The pieces began to fall into place. It seemed impossible, but all the evidence pointed to Alain. A trusted advisor had betrayed the president and his country. The discovery shook Sankara to his core. Sankara dug deeper into Alain's phone records and discovered that the number in France belonged to a high-ranking French official named Monsieur Dubois. Dubois worked for the French government and was known for his shady dealings in Africa. Sankara learned that Dubois had been secretly meeting with Alain for months, promising him money and power if he helped to remove President Traoré from office. Dubois wanted to install a new leader who would be more friendly to France and allow them to control Burkina Faso's resources. It became clear that Alain was acting on behalf of Dubois and the French government. He was a pawn in a much larger game, a game that threatened Burkina Faso's independence and freedom. Sankara knew he had to act quickly to expose the plot and bring both Alain and Dubois to justice. He decided to share his findings with the advisors, knowing they had to work together to protect their country. The situation was more dangerous than they had ever imagined. Meanwhile, in the hospital, President Traoré was slowly getting better. The doctors were amazed by his strength and resilience. He was still weak, but he was finally able to sit up and talk. When Fatima and Amadou told him about Alain's betrayal and the involvement of Monsieur Dubois, President Traoré was shocked and saddened. He couldn't believe that someone he had trusted so much could try to harm him and his country. But President Traoré was also determined to fight back. He knew that Burkina Faso's future was at stake, and he wouldn't let these traitors win. "We need to catch them," he said, his voice weak but firm. "We need to show everyone that Burkina Faso will not be controlled by foreign powers." He agreed to help Sankara and the advisors devise a plan to trap Alain and expose Monsieur Dubois's plot to the world. The president was ready to play his part in saving his nation. Sankara, the advisors, and President Traoré, even from his hospital bed, worked together to create a clever trap for Alain and expose Monsieur Dubois. They knew they had to be careful, as one wrong move could ruin everything. They decided to use Alain's greed against him. They had President Traoré send Alain a message, pretending that he was still weak and easily influenced. The message said that President Traoré was considering stepping down and needed Alain's advice on who should replace him. Alain, blinded by his ambition, took the bait. He immediately contacted Monsieur Dubois to tell him the good news. Sankara's team, who were listening to all of Alain's phone calls, now had proof of Alain's connection to Dubois and their plan to control Burkina Faso. They set up a meeting between Alain and Dubois, where they would present their plan for the new government. But instead of finding a willing president, they would find Sankara and his team, ready to bring them to justice. The trap was set. The day of the meeting arrived. Alain, excited and confident, led Monsieur Dubois into the room, expecting to find a weak and defeated President Traoré. Instead, they were met by Sankara and his team, who quickly surrounded them. "You're under arrest," Sankara announced, his voice firm, "for treason and conspiracy against the state." Alain and Dubois were stunned. They tried to resist, but they were quickly overpowered and taken into custody. The evidence against them was overwhelming, and they had no choice but to confess to their crimes. With Alain and Dubois in jail, Burkina Faso was safe once again. The foreign powers' plot to control the country had been foiled. President Traoré, now fully recovered, returned to his duties, stronger and more determined than ever to protect his nation's independence. Justice had prevailed, and Burkina Faso was free. The people rejoiced, celebrating their president's safety and the downfall of the traitors. The attempt on his life had changed President Traoré. He had seen the darkness that lurked beneath the surface, the enemies both within and outside his country. But instead of being afraid, he was more determined than ever to protect Burkina Faso and its people. He traveled throughout the country, speaking to crowds and encouraging them to stand strong against any forces that threaten their freedom. "We will not be controlled," he declared, his voice echoing with passion. "We will decide our own future." The people cheered, their hearts filled with pride and hope. They knew that their president was a true leader, someone who would always put their country first. President Traoré also began to implement new policies to strengthen Burkina Faso's economy and reduce its dependence on foreign aid. He wanted to make sure that Burkina Faso was truly independent and self-sufficient, capable of charting its own course in the world. He knew that Burkina Faso was a nation that would never be controlled again. President Traoré knew that he couldn't protect Burkina Faso alone. He needed someone he could trust, someone with the skills and experience to keep the country safe. He realized that the person he needed was Maurice Sankara. Despite their past differences, President Traoré recognized Sankara's loyalty and dedication to Burkina Faso. He offered Sankara the position of National Security Advisor, a role that would give him the authority to oversee all security matters in the country. Sankara was surprised but honored by the offer. He knew it was a chance to make a real difference and protect the country he loved. He accepted the position, and an unlikely alliance was formed. Together, President Traoré and Maurice Sankara worked tirelessly to strengthen Burkina Faso's defenses, improve its intelligence capabilities, and root out any remaining threats to its independence. They became a powerful team, united by their shared love for their country and their determination to keep it safe for generations to come. And so, Burkina Faso entered a new era of security and prosperity, thanks to the courage of its president and the dedication of its national security advisor.